Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. The death toll from Israeli airstrikes in Gaza has risen to 84, including 17 children, as Palestinians mark Eid under relentless aerial bombardment. More than 480 others have been wounded since Monday as Israel deployed additional troops for a possible ground invasion. Hamas says it has fired a rocket towards Israel's southern airport of Ramon, but Tel Aviv disputes the claim. Meanwhile, Egypt and Russia have said that Israel needs to stop attacks on the besieged Gaza Strip. Pakistan's Prime Minister spoke to the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas over the phone and condemned the Israeli aggression. In Afghanistan, security officials say at least 11 people have been killed and 13 wounded in 4 separate bombings, hours after a 3-day Eid ceasefire began across the country. Although there were no reports of direct fighting between the Taliban and the government forces, roadside bombs continued to inflict casualties on civilians. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says it is time to end the human tragedy in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. During his visit to the line of control to celebrate Eid with frontline troops, General Bajwa said the Kashmir dispute should be resolved as aspirations of the Kashmiri people and the UN resolutions. He said this on Eid Day, valiant struggle of brave people of Kashmir must not be forgotten. Most Muslim countries, including Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, are celebrating Eid al-Fitr today, marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. But prayers were held in a limited way with full observation of health protocols to prevent the spread of coronavirus. In his message, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan called on the Muslim world to celebrate Eid with the responsibility amid the pandemic. The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 160 million, with more than 3.3 million deaths. India has recorded over 4,100 fatalities and more than 362,000 infections in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, another 126 people died, while nearly 3,300 tested positive for the virus overnight. Britain has imposed sanctions on a Libyan militia, saying those who breached international law will face consequences. In a tweet, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said pro-Haftar Kenayat militia had overseen a 5-year reign of terror until 2020, torturing and murdering innocent people. Last year, the U.S. unilaterally blacklisted the militia and its leader after Russia prevented a UN Security Council committee from imposing sanctions. UEFA has announced that this month's Champions League final between Manchester City and Chelsea has been moved from Istanbul to Porto. The decision will now allow English fans to travel under COVID-19 restrictions. The final was scheduled for the 29th of May at Istanbul's Atatürk Olympic Stadium, but Turkey was put on Britain's travel red list last week. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. The death toll from Israeli airstrikes in Gaza has risen to 84, including 17 children, as Palestinians mark Eid under relentless aerial bombardment. More than 480 others have been wounded since Monday as Israel deployed additional troops for a possible ground invasion. Hamas says it has fired a rocket towards Israel's southern airport of Ramon, but Tel Aviv disputes the claim. Meanwhile, Egypt and Russia have said that Israel needs to stop the attacks on the besieged Gaza Strip. Pakistan's Prime Minister spoke to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas over the phone and condemned the Israeli aggression. Imran Khan reiterated his country's solidarity with the people of Palestine. He said Pakistan will raise the ongoing human rights violations against the Palestinians on all platforms. Pakistani activist Malala Yousafzai has also expressed solidarity with the Palestinians and urged the world leaders to act immediately. In Kenya, police have clashed with pro-Palestinian protesters and fired tear gas to disperse a crowd of more than 200 demonstrators. People took to the streets in Nairobi as Israeli violence against Palestinians reached new heights. Several protesters have been detained who had been chanting peacefully at the march. Protesters waved banners with the Palestinian flag and with words, "Kenyans stand with Palestine." Meanwhile, people also gathered in support of Palestine in Iran's capital, Tehran, and at Times Square in New York. Yesterday, similar gatherings took place in different parts of the world, including Indonesia, Britain, and Turkey. In Afghanistan, at least 11 civilians are killed and 13 others wounded in 4 separate roadside bombings in the country. This comes hours after a 3-day ceasefire began across Afghanistan to mark the Muslim festival of Eid al-Fitr. But there were no reports of direct fighting between the Taliban and government forces as they observe the temporary truce. The ceasefire follows a concerted campaign by the security forces to recapture a district outside Kabul. Earlier in his Eid message, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani said the withdrawal of foreign troops is the best opportunity for Taliban to end violence. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad called on both sides to embrace peace and refrain from acts against vengeance. In a series of tweets, he stressed the need to overcome decades of mistrust and work towards building a better society. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says it is time to end the human tragedy in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. During his visit to the line of control to celebrate Eid with frontline troops, General Bajwa said the Kashmir dispute should be resolved as per aspirations of the Kashmiri people and the UN resolutions. He said this on Eid Day, a valiant struggle of brave people of Kashmir must not be forgotten. General Bajwa hailed the morale and devotion of the troops and their operational preparedness. He said that the security, safety, and well-being of the people of Pakistan is the responsibility of the Army. Indian troops have arrested 5 family members in the Pulwama district of the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The occupying forces continued their violent court and search operation in the valley even on the day of Eid al-Fitr. The operation was going on till the last reports came in. Meanwhile, the Indian authorities continued to impose strict curfew in the territory. They did not allow people to offer Eid prayers at major mosques of the valley. Most Muslim countries, including Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, are celebrating Eid al-Fitr, marking the end of the holy month of Ramadan. The occasion is being observed in a limited way with full observation of the COVID-19 precautionary measures. Details in this report.
Eid prayers around the Muslim world were held in a limited way with full observation of health protocols to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi has sent his wishes to the nation and urged them to adhere to the coronavirus precautionary measures. In his message, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan also called on the Muslim world to celebrate Eid with responsibility amid the pandemic. In Turkey, the historic Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque hosted its first Eid al-Fitr prayers in 87 years, while thousands of Palestinians offered their Eid prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque despite the continuous airstrikes and violence from the occupying Israeli forces.
The global number of COVID-19 cases has crossed 160 million with more than 3.3 million deaths. India has recorded over 4,100 fatalities and more than 362,000 infections in the past 24 hours. More in this report.
As India's caseload reached 23.7 million and death toll crossed 258,000. The World Health Organization said the country accounted for 50% of global new cases and 30% of deaths over the past week. The health body's scientists said some evidence suggests the new variant of COVID-19 in India may be more transmissible and contributing to the surge. With hundreds of thousands of cases daily, India is also struggling to keep up the pace of its much-needed mass vaccination drive.
मेरा सेकंड डोज है कल और
I need to get my second dose. I came yesterday and came again today, but they don't have the doses available. They have asked me to come back again tomorrow or some other day for vaccination.
Brazil will run out of raw materials to produce the Sinovac vaccine by Friday, as a supply shipment has been held up in Chinese export clearance. Sao Paulo governor blamed the delay on diplomatic ill will, saying the federal government should apologize to Beijing for its harsh criticism of China. Over in the US, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said 28 people developed blood clotting syndrome after getting the Johnson & Johnson shots. As US political leaders grow increasingly desperate to persuade Americans to get the vaccine, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine topped offers of baseball tickets with a $1 million prize drawing.
We will announce a winner of a separate drawing for adults who have received at least their first dose of the vaccine. This announcement will occur each Wednesday for 5 weeks, and the winner each Wednesday will receive $1 million.
Meanwhile, a study has found the number of coronavirus infections in England has halved since March, helped by the swift rollout of vaccines. Scientists at Imperial College London say an average of only 1 in 1,000 people got infected, but new variants remain a threat.
In Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed another 126 lives overnight. The health ministry says the country's death toll has reached 19,336. It said more than 3,200 people contracted the virus over the past 24 hours. The number of confirmed cases in the country has crossed 870,000, of which more than 776,000 have recovered. Health officials said the number of active cases in the country has declined to 75,000. Over 4,500 of them are critical. Britain says it has imposed sanctions against Libya's pro-Haftar Kinayat militia and its 2 leaders. In a tweet, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said those 2 breached international law in Libya will have to face the consequences. Raab adds the militia has overseen a reign of terror until 2020, which he said included torturing and murdering of innocent people. He said London has imposed asset freezes and travel bans on the militia group. Last year, the U.S. unilaterally blacklisted the militia and its leader after Russia prevented a UN Security Council committee from imposing sanctions. The Kinayat was allied to the Libyan National Army, helping it mount a failed 14-month assault on Tripoli that began in 2019. Arab coalition in Yemen says it has destroyed 8 drones and 3 ballistic missiles launched by the Houthis. In a statement, the coalition said all projectiles were fired towards Saudi Arabia, but it did not specify the exact locations. The rebels claimed that the attacks were aimed at a site belonging to Saudi Aramco, Najran Airport, and other targets in the south of the kingdom. Yemeni rebels have escalated cross-border attacks into Saudi Arabia despite calls by the UN to halt the violence. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Myanmar, anti-coup protesters have yet again taken to the streets in the Sagaing and Trin Thorri region of the country. In Mandalay, Buddhist monks called for an end to the military dictatorship. Meanwhile, a reporter from a banned news agency has been sentenced to 3 years in prison by a military court. Min Nhu is the first journalist to be convicted under the revised penal code that activists say criminalizes free speech. Rights group Amnesty International has called for an immediate release of Nhu along with all other journalists. At least 785 people have been killed and about 80 journalists arrested since the army seized power on the 1st of February. The United States Director of National Intelligence is reportedly visiting the demilitarized zone along the border with North Korea. The South Korea media reports Avril Haines arrived at their zone with other members of the U.S. delegation. It said Haynes earlier held a trilateral meeting with her South Korean and Japanese counterparts in Tokyo. Avril is expected to take a brief tour of the joint security area in the inter-Korean truce village of Panmunjom. The visit comes a week ahead of the South Korean President Moon Jae-in's first summit with the United States. President Joe Biden stalled denuclearization talks with North Korea are expected to top the agenda of the May 21st summit in Washington. In Colombia, anti-government protests have entered their third week as unions, student groups, and others conveyed a national strike. 42 people have died so far in the protests that began on the 28th of April against now-canceled tax reforms. Thousands of people gathered in the capital Bogota's Bolivar Plaza. They were calling for an end to police violence and inequality and the withdrawal of health reform. Protest leaders had called for a national strike after a meeting with President Ivan Duque yielded no results. The U.S. and the U.K. have condemned the violence, while the European Union has warned against excessive force by the police. The UN Security Council also adopted a resolution to extend its peace monitoring mission in Colombia until October. China has slammed Western allegations of human rights violations in the Xinjiang province, calling them an utter political farce. This comes as the U.S. and the U.K., along with Germany, organized a virtual event to highlight alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. China's UN mission says these accusations are aimed at suppressing Beijing by creating domestic political disturbances. Chinese diplomat Guo Yakun said Beijing welcomes everyone to visit the autonomous region, but he said China opposes any kind of investigation based on lies and with the presumption of guilt.
So-called genocide, forced labor, systematic rape and torture in Xinjiang are lies of the century, which never happened and will never happen in China. I could tell more truth, but you don't give me more time because you reject the truth. Xinjiang Autonomous Region of China has held 40+ press conferences, but your media refuse to report because you fear the truth. China has nothing to hide on Xinjiang. Xinjiang is always open.
In the United States, the Colonial Pipeline has slowly begun to restart the country's largest fuel pipeline network. Last Friday, a ransomware attack shut the line, triggering fuel shortages and panic buying in the southeastern United States. Colonial Pipeline has warned that it will take several days before supplies return to normal. The company added it had taken additional security measures before initiating the restart. Meanwhile, the White House says it will continue to offer any assistance the company needs. In a statement, spokesperson Jen Psaki urged Americans to purchase fuel as needed and do not hoard it. Swiss and American climbers have died on Mount Everest. These mark the first fatalities on the world's highest peak this season. A hiking company officials said Abdul Varaich and Pee-wee Liu died of exhaustion while descending the slopes. The company's officials said additional Sherpas were sent with supplies and oxygen, but they could not save them. He said Varaich was on his way down after reaching the summit, but Liu could not reach the summit of Everest and died on the descent after suffering snow blindness and exhaustion. An imperial jewelry sale has fetched nearly $3 million at auction at Christie's in Geneva. The items at the sale included a set of sapphire and diamond objects that belonged to Napoleon's adoptive daughter. There were 9 items from the collection of Napoleon's daughter, Stephanie de Beauharnais. There was also a sapphire crown that previously belonged to Queen Maria II of Portugal. The jewels were among 144 lots that went under the hammer, achieving total sales of more than $63 million. Christie's jewelry department head says the items sold for 3 times its pre-sale estimates. The jewels date back to the early 19th century and are believed to have been a wedding gift for de Beauharnais. Saudi Arabia's ban on imports of Lebanese agriculture produce has multiplied the woes of local farmers. The ban was imposed on Lebanese perishable items in April over the allegations of drug smuggling. But in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, fruits are ripening and vegetables are growing up with no buyers in sight. This report has the details.
The Saudi market for exports, worth $24 million a year, has been shut down for now, leaving farmers racing to find alternative buyers abroad. The growers acknowledged that smugglers did exploit loopholes in the export process. However, they say the Lebanese authorities have now tightened border controls.
كان في ثغرات كبيرة.
There were gaps that smugglers made use of. They knew the scanner was not functioning, and this is why they pushed to export from Beirut, from Lebanon, to other countries. Now the state repaired the scanner and they tightened controls at the crossings.
Lebanon's government has promised to work with Saudi Arabia and has also asked Riyadh to review its ban. A collapse in the Lebanese pound has aggravated the worries of farmers who need to buy fertilizer at inflated rates.
We can't continue anymore. Everything is loss on top of loss. The fertilizers and chemicals are all priced in dollars. We can't make it work. Loss on top of loss. Sitting at home is better.
Saudi Arabia said pomegranates from Lebanon had been hollowed out and filled with captagon pills, a type of amphetamine. With no exports, prices of vegetables have plunged in Lebanon, complicating matters for people and farmers alike.
It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the Wall Street stocks have rebounded from steep losses as investors picked up major technology shares after the pullback. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index rose nearly 1.5% at open. Nasdaq Composite also opened higher by over 1%, while the S&P 500 index landed in the positive territory. Meanwhile, oil prices fell as a key U.S. pipeline resumed operations, halting a rally that had lifted crude to an 8-week high. Tesla Incorporation has suspended the use of Bitcoin to purchase its vehicles. Tesla CEO Elon Musk made the announcement in a tweet, citing concerns about the use of fossil fuel for Bitcoin mining. Musk said Tesla will not sell any Bitcoin and intends to use it for transactions after mining transactions to be more sustainable energy. He said the company is looking at other cryptocurrencies that use less than 1% of Bitcoin's energy. Tesla's chief added cryptocurrency has a promising future, but it cannot come at the cost of the environment. Bitcoin fell more than 7% following the announcement and traded at $52,669. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.news.